Thank you all for joining us today. I'll tell you, I could not be more excited about this topic after talking with our participants or the content that we've got lined up for you. I really hope that you'll think so too. We're going to run about 45 minutes. If there are questions, please do post them up in chat, and we'll pick them up. And speaking of our esteemed panel, kindness thanks to you all for time and contribution. We've got Bob Allen, Ideas founder and chief storytelling officer with a lifetime of experience in brand and media and experience design with the Walt Disney Company. And then with ideas for 1,300 clients across the globe, just a few projects. And with us, we've got Jeremy Hallowert with a lifetime of attractions leadership and marketing and branding experience, most recently as president and CEO of the Jungle Island Resort in Miami. We've got Rick Allen, thank you, leveraging a lifetime as a senior exec at Disney Parks and Resorts. He's now an also legendary operations and leadership and training consultant. You can hire him. He's another famous Allen. He's been with Disney Parks since he was just a mere boy. And then there's me. I'm Mark Edson. I do biz dev for Ideas and generally just try to help people deliver the best experience they can at their attractions and have a great time doing it. And also executive producer Hannah Baumhofer. Thank you so much, Hannah, for making all this magic happen, pulling all the strings. So, you can almost set your watch with the timing that every year or every other year, the big theme park players are going to do some grand celebration. I was in the middle of them, some grand celebration or attraction opening to give guests a new reason to visit, give the park something to talk about. But our thought for today is that small to medium-sized regional attractions have capital constraints that make it difficult to achieve growth by adding another attraction or doing a major renovation every year. We think there are smart ways to grow your business through use of a time-tested methodology, a little creativity and innovation that, those don't necessarily rely on a massive capital expenditure. And so that's where we're heading. And I'll turn the helm over to Bob to build on that and offer ideas, thoughts behind, what really makes people want to visit, what makes it, what is it that makes destinations perform? And how can we deliver that without burning our P&L for the next 20 years? So, Bob?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's always dangerous to give a story guy a microphone. So I'll take a little liberty here and maybe do some stage setting, right? And look, I don't think we'd offer up any of this as hard and cold fact, truth, and beauty. I think what I'm going to tee up to get the real smart guys going here is some observations and a couple of thoughts, maybe a thesis statement. So let's dive in here. Here's the first observation and this is self-evident, but I like saying it out loud. We as an industry have more options for guest experience delivery than we've ever had, than we could have ever imagined having, at least speaking for myself, going back those many years. And, you all know what they are. They're increasingly complicated. And by the way, that evolution curve of all those delivery system options is also rapidly evolving. So it's kind of a logarithmic flow that we're dealing with. But, just to run through some, and much of these, frankly, are, much vaunted. And we could have a robust and round debate on whether any of them are actually valuable. I'm going to presume some of them are sometimes, but, gamification. So, that's been a buzzword. New immersion systems. I don't even like to use the I word anymore because it's gotten so pale, but there are lots of ways to do that now, both big and small. Robotics, right? I was talking to my wife the other night about, I worked on the original Spaceship Earth show at Epcot, and I wrote it recently, and she said, well, how did it hold up? I said, it's been rewritten. And I said, honestly, I think the AA figure curve has gone from cutting edge technology all the way back around to, oh, isn't that quaint? Because we have so many other ways of doing that now. So the show actually does hold up pretty well. And then who knows where AI is going to go in all this? That's another topic for another day, probably. Personalization is a big deal. How do we put each guest in their part of a story? That's increasingly available. Everybody's playing the app game now. Again, sometimes they help, and sometimes I think a good case can be made that they get in the way. But they're out there, and they're part of the mix. Another one that isn't as object specific, but I think really plays is the adoption curve or the adaptation curve of new market proven IP is really quick now. Partly we've had this extraordinary explosion in content, right, because of streaming and the sort of the diaspora of the media market. So there's lots more content out there to maybe take a look at and choose from. Also, we have a lot of new form factors. There's been much made about ride and show stuff happening now built around game IP. That's kind of obvious. I think there's emerging even other platforms like the market share that's currently commanded by graphic novels is immense. It went from being sort of that's kind of a young adult thing to a worldwide giant mass market phenomenon. And I think who knows, we may see TikTok influencer content becoming an experience soon. So lots and lots of ways to grab and run with IP out there, more than ever before. Maybe the flip side of some of these, particularly the technical ones, I would argue, is we've got some pretty good emerging market evidence now that real, live, actual human engagement and human performance, things that musicians do, things that actors do, things that performers do, in an increasingly virtual world where people spend a lot more of their time on screens than ever before, turns out to be growing in value. So the premium placed on, no, I actually saw an actual human do that, is growing, and we see that across markets. As are consumer selections that move toward brands and experiences that are markedly sustainable or have employed net positive development and operating strategies. Inclusiveness is gigantic. Ease of access is turning out to be a really big issue, and those are all just human factors, right? So you kind of can make a biscuit out of all of those. You mix it up and say that's an interesting background, and possibly interesting in the Chinese sense. You all heard the gag that in traditional China, one of the worst things you could say to somebody is, may you have an interesting life, because interesting meant way too complicated to deal with. So there's a lot going on. So good news, lots of choices, right? Here's another observation, maybe goes with that one. So if you take that little biscuit we just baked and you look at it and you kind of look at its pieces and parts, you say, okay, look, there's a really interesting recipe book there that potentially could offer, my guess, a more satisfying experience. In that context, we have to drop that against the market backdrop. So while we're getting more choices, the other news is competition for that guest share of the leisure wallet, or just getting attention, right? Guest time. The competition is absolutely fierce. Really difficult to get anybody to look at you once, drive trial. That's all getting a lot harder than it used to be. One reason is what we've seen is a tremendous amount of blurring between what's a theme park, what's a resort, what's a family entertainment center. Oh, theme dining, does that count? Well, I don't know, is there ride and show in it? There might be. What about retail dining and entertainment districts? Zoos, aquaria, science and technology centers. Well, is it a science center if it's got an aquarium in it, or is it a zoo, or is it up the middle? Because people like aquariums, so lots of science centers are trying to flirt with that now. Let's not forget about cruises, the fastest growing leisure activity on earth, just huge growth. And then there's probably a whole bunch of hybrids that most of you will even know that I have no idea about. My point is, there's an awful lot more to do with your time. And so when I start thinking about, I'm busy, my attention is fractured, content's coming at me right and left on screens all day long, you know, and I have all these choices, you know, it all, to me, it almost offsets, yeah, we got all these interesting new things we can do, but on the other hand, good heavens, it is a complicated space we're all living in within which we have to do them. Okay, so if any of that is even remotely correct, you know, or at least for the next few minutes, let's presume it might be. I kind of come up with, so what's the key question? So it goes something like this. Given all of that, given those observations, and I don't know about you, but my experience is a business climate that puts increasing pressure for, you know, internal rate of return on equity, higher EBITDA, and all kinds of resource constraints. How do I decide where to put my effort? Where do I put the emphasis? What's my pathway to sustainable growth over time is sort of the key question. So our thesis, having looked at it a bit, is that this environment kind of builds an argument that today, successful growing destination entertainment, to cast a broad net around it, probably isn't built from the ground up. I don't care how good your site is. It's probably built from the guest out. We think, we really believe, and we've experienced that really paying not lip service, but really intense attention to the guest and understanding that is the key starting point. So we have this name, we call it destination performance, and we'll talk about that in a second, and then I'm going to turn it over to the smart folks. But building from the guest out really is alchemical, right? It's kind of semi-magic, but it requires this interesting planful mix of components. You know, yes, certainly there's going to always be room and a requirement, and in fact a valid need for sort of the historical, you know, big ride show capital asset, you know, acquisition to defeat that attendance burn curve, right? But that alone, that swing for the fence model alone, looks like it's way too expensive now as a primary strategy, and because those prices escalate all the time. So our argument is that if we employed a particular kind of systems thinking around this, we might come up with some answers that turn out to be a little bit more viable. So let me just define destination performance. It's a term of art we like to use, and I'm going to give you some metrics here. These aren't the metrics. These are my 6 metrics. You can plug your own in, and lots of people do. But in general, if I said, okay, the premise for a high-performing, growing destination entertainment enterprise kind of rests on these things. We want attendance growth over time. We want attendance to go up over time. We don't want to see it turn around and go the other way. We'd like our per capita growth to grow over time. We'd like to be able to take rate on admissions, food and beverage, merchandise, parking. We want that per cap growth to go up. And we want that per cap growth to go up while we're also growing attendance. And that's a pretty tall order. We'd like length of stay to increase. Generally speaking, we all know that the longer a guest stays, the more likely they are to both, number one, report that they had a good time, but also spend more money. And that drives some of that per cap. We'd like to shorten the visitation curve. We want to see increased frequency. If you come every year, we need to do things that will get you to come every 8 months. That's a really long lever to pull. And part of that also is identifying and making sure we're really taking good care of our top fans. You know, the folks who are in the insert name here O-file camp, people that love what we're doing. They'll come 6 times a year if we really take care of them. These days, we can spend all the money on advertising and marketing that we want. Homage to my marketing colleagues, but the number one thing that's going to drive that next turnstile click is somebody posting on Instagram. Somebody sending their friend a text saying, you got to come with me next time. The kids loved it. So that driving that tremendous intent to recommend, and in fact, driving that all the way through action is critical. And finally, you know, guest satisfaction scores in that world are more important than ever. We need to be able to, you know, I do like to laugh because here in Orlando, we get an interesting viewpoint. If you drive down the Beeline, you know, every other billboard says world's best something or world's biggest something. I'm not sure that's borne out by scores, but what we care is what the guest says. So if you take those 6 things And we just said, look, if we can start moving the needle up on all 6 of those, or gee, even 4 of them, we're going to be performing well. We're going to start hitting those marks we want to hit. So our simple premise is we think systemically, if you start with a guest, you're going to win. So what does that mean? It means 2 things to us. One is anecdotally understanding your guest and understanding your guest's behavior. And by anecdotally, I literally mean collecting stories. And I think we'll hear some today, but the most important stories to collect are from the frontline folks in the operation that are working with the guests. They know what the guests are saying, what the guests are doing, what they like, what they don't like. You can, and you can talk to partners, and you can talk to your inbound channel partners, all those things, and just harvesting, well, what seems to be working? How do we, when they're having a great day, how do we know? The other side is to do that formally, and I won't get deep into this, don't have time today, but formally through primary market research, and the word primary is what's key. It is not, frankly, going to prove to be good enough to go scrape the internet. You really, it turns out, have to go ask people who look a lot like the people you're entertaining exactly what they think. And if you ask properly, they will really tell you. So we understand the guest. Once we do that, we can plug in our business factors, So, what's our internal rate of return on capital requirement? What are the interest rates right now? What are the operating realities of our business? Where are we on EBITDA? Do we need to drive a few more points of performance? And you can kind of arrive at whatever it might be. If you got those metrics to move, what should you spend to drive those metrics? Not what can you, but what should you spend? And that's a fascinating number. Finally, we can get into the home stretch. Well, okay, if we know our guests, we understand them better, and we kind of understand our business better, and we've put some guardrails around that, then what we're going to propose is, instead of incrementing from this moment, we start with, hey, we're not going to throw anything away. What's a new, fresh story or stories we can start telling to those guests? And you start with that narrative. And then finally, the tail on the dog is, all right, if we know all those things, what's a long-term experience design plan look like? And that's going to be a mix of blending brand activation, guest engagement, all those tactics and strategies in a mix that says this integrates well, and it includes 5 of those and 6 of these and 22 of these, and then, yeah, maybe one big hero ride, because we're going to have to buy one of those eventually. So I'm going to stop there just to say, and I know that's a lot to come at you with, but that's sort of what's behind the dialogue today. Now, none of that's as important as what happens next, which is some people that are really out there doing this, maybe sharing a few stories. So Mark, I'll relinquish the mic.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Bob. Holy smokes, that was a lot. Thank you. Yeah, I would go to Jeremy, and as I was listening to the elements of destination performance, I think that he has found multiple ways of bringing them to life to engage guests with and that the context of this session. Engage guests in ways that just don't require a lot of capital. He started generally with nothing. He had a wonderful piece of real estate, and then activated that, ignited that through using partnerships. And I think that's such a wonderful story. Jeremy, you want to share a little bit about that? There's so many pieces to it.
Sure, absolutely. And I want to make sure I tie this into what Bob was talking about as well, right? So when you were, anyone who's familiar with the Jungle Island project here, Jungle Island is a theme park here in Miami, carries 85 years of history. And a couple of years ago, there were great dreams and even bigger promises, and there was so much engineering happening. And unfortunately, like everywhere else, COVID happened. So we engaged with ideas, and together with ideas, we came up with a brilliant new master plan for the property. But unfortunately, because of COVID, the cost ballooned so much for the redesign of the park that I could almost argue that from an investor perspective, there was some analysis paralysis, right? Everybody got so much data and information and so many decisions to make that honestly nothing happened anymore. So after we were closed for 2 years. And after being closed for 2 years, we started seeing a breakdown of our property. Although we were trying to take care of the asset itself, we started seeing we started certain things by not being used, they were starting to, well, go down. And what happened was we started realizing, okay, so what do we have? We have this absolute unique real estate here in the heart of Miami. We've got these 18 acres of lush jungle in the heart of a concrete jungle, right? And what is the biggest value? Well, because of COVID, we've noticed that having that natural resource was absolutely top dollar, right? That was absolutely vital for people who were willing to come out and do something else. And for us, we didn't have the staffing anymore. We didn't have the budget anymore. So we re-engaged by opening up the Jungle Island, almost looking at it from a public park perspective. So we decided to allow people to just come and have a peek at the jungle. And we did it first with partnerships, right? So we found partnerships who wanted to do a unique activation for us, who wanted to do a Halloween activation. And during COVID, they were able to establish a drive-through Halloween haunted house experience. And they wanted to actually come and build 5 or 6 haunted houses here on site of Jungle Island. And all of a sudden, it allowed us to really re-engage that machine of traffic and attendance, right? So they did a great job in marketing it. They did a great job in building the experience itself. And basically for us, all of a sudden, we saw the benefit of doing that with a partner because they brought all the employees to the table. They brought all the marketing dollars to the table. And from a Jungle Island perspective, we were able to capitalize on parking, on food and beverage, and on a limited revenue share on the ticket sales, right? And from that moment on, we decided to just keep moving in the same space because all of a sudden we decided that, hey, there's actually money to be made in parking and in food and beverage and in all the other things, right? So we opened up the park for a garden admission. Going back to what I was saying, almost looking at Jungle Island as a public park. And we no longer call it general admission because we didn't want to raise any expectations for guests. Because what do you do in a garden? You stroll around. And we started by doing so, and we actually we started just by opening it up. We saw that people really wanted to come and stroll the gardens. And then we started adding little layers on top of it. So we started making little improvements step by step. And I'm really talking small improvements, right? Because the park was slated for demolition, right? I mean, we were almost going to tear everything apart. So we had nothing left in the sense of there was no more signage, there was no fencing, there was no show. It was a very, very limited product offering. So we started gradually increasing what that offering was by returning, for instance, signage for the guests, by adding a little new food outlet, by adding a show, by building a new enclosure that could be built in-house that really brought something extra to the guest. And whatever money was made, we almost tried reinvesting that little capital that was being brought in, because the original intent of opening this park was really just to pay for the upkeep of the park. It wasn't really to generate a large amount of revenue there. And we are now a year and a half later, and by continuing this path of continuous improvement, we've been able to achieve actual record attendance by doing so. And the park that exists today is miles away from the park that was here in 2019 when I started it. And it's been a really interesting journey.
So there were more elements to that journey and partnerships. I think you had a treetop experience that I think you mentioned briefly on there, and you're moving forward with an inflatable water park and beer garden. Are there any more pieces to that? And maybe you want to save those for later.
It's however you want to address it, right, Mark? So basically, when it comes to partnerships, right? So going back to what we were saying earlier in the conversation is the fact that once you realize what you have and what you own, and that is the space, how do you maximize that space, right? How do you create revenue from that space? And they're creating those partnerships and finding people that were willing to invest and believe in the project was absolutely instrumental, right? So first of all, we had Treetop Trekking, which is an aerial adventure course that came in to operate our aerial adventure park. We then continued with the Lantern Festival, where we operated from November until March for an evening activation as well. All in the same model. We provide the space, you provide the efforts and the energy, and we'll do a revenue share on this. And that kept transitioning, right? So we have Halloween, we've got Luminosa, which is our Lantern Festival, we've got Treetop Trekking, we've added a carousel that's currently being built in a similar model. And then we are currently adding a giant inflatable water park, and that we're very, very excited about. I would say I'm almost as excited as I would have been when I was 12 years old, seeing it in my backyard. So
You bet.
so those are the things that are really create a brand new park experience, right? Without really putting the capital.
Yeah, that's just your the innovation and creativity that you have brought to life there through partnerships. Again, using the real estate, and that stuff generally doesn't cost anything. You've got a revenue share with them, and it's just it's brilliant. And all the things that Bob mentioned as far as destination performance earlier, you are actually bringing them to life. So
But Mark, do you know
super
the
cool.
most interesting thing of all? And it's something that really dawned on me when I had a quick chat with one of our marketing coordinators last week. She decided to leave us because she said very blatantly, like, oh, I thought when I joined Joya Beach or Beach Club, there would be money that I could spend. And honestly, that's how a lot of people think, right? And as long as you've got money to throw at a problem, your problem will probably or hopefully go away. It's really being creative without money that sets us apart, right? It's really being creative and to drive attendance and to do things without needing money that really is a differentiator, right? And from now on, every time I have a job interview with somebody from marketing, it's the first thing that I ask. I tell them, there's no money, so how do you want to go about it?
Right on. Great. Be creative. So
Hey, Jeremy, if I could just knock on real quick, I'm gonna toot your horn a little. Jeremy, among other things, is a really, really brilliant marketer. And I think the other underpinning of that story is recognizing the absolute power of that tremendous brand equity. Jungle Island is enviable for the rest of us because it has this amazing brand engine. You know, you can't talk to somebody in Miami and say Jungle Island and not get a response that sounds like, oh, went there when I was a kid. Oh, I love to take my grandkids. It remind, you know, so recognizing that brand value and saying that gives us the latitude to be a little more clever. I think there's a big piece of, you know, and I applaud Jeremy's creativity and frankly, courage, because I know his owners.
Appreciate that.
right on. So Rick, Jeremy's talked about relationships with partners, and through your career, you've seen and designed some just fantastic ways to build relationships with your guests. Maybe you could share a couple of those examples.
Sure. So,
Thank you.
you know, an interesting point. You know, my career was 40 plus years of Walt Disney World, and almost all of that was in operations. And so I'm an operating guy, and so when we think about, you know, how you're going to get money, like you all just said, if you had money to spend, or the marketing person asks, "What money do I have?" Operators don't get any money. You have to spend money. You've got you're the biggest expense. You've got the labor piece, which is all the most. So we have to be very, 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 very creative, and that's the fun part. I think an interesting thing that hit me over the head as soon as I got there, and we talk to our cast members about this all the time, is to say we are surrounded here with hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure. You know, rides that are designed some of the best in the world. And what do our guests write to us about or answer surveys about? And 90% of those guest letters that I would get all talk about interaction, engagement with the cast members. That's where it hits home. So a custodial guy getting down on his knees to talk to little kids and say, good morning, princess, or how are you doing? That'll get you a guest letter. Simply walking a guest to a restroom instead of pointing at it over there. Honey, you want to know where to do? Come with me. Let me just show you. People are overwhelmed with that. That's no cost, low cost. We had guests who would book their vacations around the availability of a housekeeper. And they would say, I'll come book on the date she's there, and I want to make sure I get her room. That sort of engagement is no cost. It doesn't cost anything in order to make that happen. I'll give you a couple of stories. I was the opening general manager for Disney's Art of Animation Resort, which is themed around 4 feature films for Disney, if you haven't seen it. Finding Nemo, Cars, The Lion King, and The Little Mermaid. And so our challenge was to immerse our guests into those stories more than we had at any other resort. And we had just a ball doing it. The things we came up with were all for employees using language was the biggest one. Just short little things to help keep guests in the story. Not long spiels, just simple. So we would train our cast. If you see somebody walking somewhere, you can just say, hey, just keep swimming, just like out of the movie, right? Or if you're over near the Cars area, you can look at kids and go, hey, ka-chow, and they'd always ka-chow you right back. Or Hakuna Matata when you're out near the Lion King, etc. When we check people in, like for example, if you check into Art of Animation, at least when we opened, you'd have, if you were going to be in the Cars buildings, we checked you in like you were a car. And so we'd say, hey, you're a car. So here's the keys to your garage. And we'd give you directions. And we'd say, okay, I want you to when you go out of the lobby, you're going to go past the Big Blue, which is the ocean in Finding Nemo. You're going to go past the Big Blue. You're going to turn right. You're going to go past the drop-off. You're going to see Route 66. I want you to take Route 66. You're going to see your garage is on the building on the left. And by the way, say hi to Tomater when you walk by for me. We'd get letters, people saying it's just awesome, that you got us there. And it absolutely, there was no cost. I'll give you a similar one about, I got to work in Epcot for a while in Future World, and at Soarin' Around the World. It used to be Soarin' over California, and the show was changed to Soarin' Around the World when I was there. And so we were closed while the rehab was happening, and we got to reopen. And so to do that, we got a chance to train everybody, and we used those same tactics. And I know these sound simple, but that's what we're looking for, right? So particularly if it's stormy weather outside, which it always is in Florida, right? Most of the time, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, big rain coming down. As people are walking in the queue, we welcome them in and we tell them to say, hey, welcome. It's a great day to fly. It's a great day to fly. Beautiful weather. It's a great day to fly. And people are looking at you like you're crazy, and then they're starting to get into, okay, yeah, I'm going to be part of the story here. My favorite part of that one was, if you've been on Soarin', or on any sort of these types of, flying theater rides, at the end, when you exit, you land because you've been flying, and then you walk out and the exit doors open, and we'd go stand back there, and other cast members. And you just look at them all and you'd say, welcome back, welcome back. Well, simple thing, and sometimes people ignore, but then you double takes going, oh yeah, welcome back. Yeah, I was gone. That's right. Or you just say, how was your flight? How was your flight? Well, they grab you, pull you. Oh, it was great. It was marvelous. And I know the attraction did the hard work, but it's those simple things that are the things we got the letters about. I'll tell you one about Cabana Bay. Mark, shut me up when you just wave at me and I'll get it.
This is all great stuff.
Okay,
the great thing, Rick, sorry to interrupt. The great thing is that any operator, any park or a theme park or zoo or aquarium or water park, whatever, they can apply these thoughts, these immersions in stories at every guest engagement as well. So it's really lighting me up. Forgive the interruption. Carry on.
I think you're right. Those are fun things to brainstorm about other businesses. And I'll give you a non-Disney example. I went and checked into Cabana Bay Resort, which is Lowe's operated and over at Universal Studios. And here I'm a hotel guy, and I'm looking at everything critically and cynically. And I was there with my daughter. She's a very big Harry Potter fan. And so we were checking in, and their employee said, "So, hey, what are you doing while you're here?" And I said, "Well, my daughter's a big Harry Potter fan, and so we're going to go see Harry Potter." And she goes, "Oh, you're going to love it. You're going to love it." And then she gave me some tips, which you'd expect. That's great. You go at this time and do all this. And she said, when you get to Hogwarts, you're going to ride on, whatever the specific coolest Harry Potter ride was. I can't remember the name of it. She says, you're going to ride on that. She goes, that's the best one out there. She says, here's what I want you to do. Please come back. You and Libby, I told her my daughter's name, come back and tell me how it was when you come. Well, I never forgot. Really? You want me to? And I did, by the way. I went back the next day and I said, hey, I want to let you know that we really had a ball on that. Oh, that's great. You got to try this and try that. It costs nothing, but that engagement, I think, was there. I'll give you just another real short one, then we move on. I was at the Grand Floridian Beach Resort, so a luxury resort at Walt Disney World, and I'd heard that one of the cast members there. We kept getting all these great letters, and it turns out I went out on the front desk one time, and somebody said, "Hey, she's doing it. You need to go watch." And I went out to watch her, and what she would do is, I wish I had a little model here. She would check in the guests' kids' stuffed animals. So if they had a stuffed Bambi, then she would put it up on the desk and go, okay, well, Bambi, you're checking in, okay, and I'm going to give you a little ID card, and she'd put the name on it, Bambi's ID card, and she'd make the little kids sign the little reg card and all that. Oh man, you're kidding me that we got letters out and that it just cost nothing for that to happen, but that kid has a memory forever, and of course the parents have that memory forever too. Those sort of things that you learn from your cast too. You learn from your employees. They come up with the best ideas.
You bet. Yeah, that's just such great stuff. I'm as I mentioned before, I'm all filled up on those, and they other than training time, they just cost nothing.
Yeah.
So to that, and costing nothing. And Jeremy, earlier with partnerships, I know that or in the early days, and then it grew. I thought it was a fascinating story, how you grew your admissions, your gates, and tailored those things along with your partnerships to drive attendance, drive revenue, which is key to anybody's success. Again, based in nothing that you had before. Can you share a little bit about what you did with your admissions evolution?
Sure, absolutely. So going back to what I was talking about, opening up for Halloween and making money from parking and food and beverage. When we opened the park in the beginning, I looked at what some of the biggest tech players were doing, and they were giving things away for free. And I was like, what if I give the park away for free? So, and it was really interesting because all of a sudden I didn't have to spend money on advertising, didn't have to spend money on PR or to get the word out. It just started snowballing by itself that if people registered online in advance, that they could come visit the park for free. And I started looking at the park as like an outdoor FEC, where there's certain things were included in the admission, and certain elements of the park that required additional staffing or that had additional operating costs would come at a separate charge for the guests itself. Now, what the really interesting part of this was that when people were registering online, everything worked really well, but then you had your certain guests that all of a sudden knew that the park was operational and open, and they showed up. And it took more time to explain to the guests why it was free than just saying, it'll be $10 to come in today. Because they were much happier to hand over $10 than you having to explain why they could wander around for free. People didn't understand the concept of free. And we've been really playing with that model. And to what Bob was saying in regards to marketing earlier on his metrics. So we had a few, obviously it's the guests that do the storytelling for you on the marketing side. And especially when you bring them in, everybody these days is an influencer, right? And believe me, I don't like the term at all. But everybody is posting on their stories. Everybody's posting on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. And there was this lady that came to the park, created a fun video, and had rap music on it or hip hop music on it. And all of a sudden, there was this other Miami things to do with kids that actually saw the video, used the Lion King music on it. Same video, just changed the music, went to the Lion King music, and that thing went viral in Miami through the wazoo. And all of a sudden, we had 4,000 people registered every single day for like in August and September, which are traditionally the slowest months of the year for us. And those are things that you can only dream about, right? We had 25-year record attendance in August and in September. And just by giving it away. I mean, if I would have, or if anyone would have to spend that amount in marketing dollars, you're talking about very substantial marketing campaigns to get the same level of exposure that we were able to get just by giving it away.
Yeah, that's just great stuff. I was so taken by that when we had talked earlier in the week on it. Let me go back to.
But it's a very double-edged sword, right, Mark? In the sense that it becomes addictive as well to certain people. So we had to start weaning them off. So this year we decided that last year you could register until the evening before arrival, and then this year you had to register up to 48 hours prior to arrival, and during high season up to 7 days prior to arrival. And it really worked well for us until May. All of a sudden in May, we really fell off a cliff. So our marketing team came up with another funny dancing capybara movie about free registration, went viral again, and we've been seeing plus 1,000 visitors per day again for the last couple of weeks now. So it's interesting how you can play with it once you figure out what the sprinkles are, right? What the recipe is.
Yeah, that's just the best. Let me. I'm watching our clock, and I'm like, holy smokes, we have been hearing some wonderful stories, and we're burning some clock here. I want to get back to Rick, and one of the greatest stories that he had shared with me was, and I'll let you go with it, Rick. I don't want to share too much, but just the test track and your team brainstorm. And I just from a problem solving perspective and cast engagement and letting them lead, I just thought it was fantastic. Share a little bit about that, would you?
Yeah, sure. So test track said interesting, complex attraction, and it takes a lot of people to do it. Yeah, but this one ends up with a little simple exercise. Maybe that's what you're talking about, right, Mark? That exercise we'll do. Yeah, we can share that. So what we're supposed to do when I was there by our SOPs and our spiels is every guest is supposed to be welcomed as they walk through, and they're supposed to be welcomed with "Welcome to Test Track, presented by Chevrolet." Welcome to Test Track, presented by Chevrolet. Welcome to 1,600 guests an hour we do, and welcome. So obviously we're not doing it. And when you go to the cast to say, "Hey, how's this going?" They say, "It's ridiculous." They all want to do a good job, and they look at you and say, "We can't do that."
It's impossible.
Well, what can we do? Good point. So we got the team together and talked to them about that and said, "How can you engage more?" And they said, "Look, we think there's ways to do it, but some people are really outgoing, and it's easy for them to engage with guests. Some people aren't as outgoing, and how do we get there?" And so we got this very simple that I would share, a very simple exercise. We'd get about 20 or 30 people in a room, and we were doing some training with them, and we'd say, "All right, get ready. We're going to brainstorm." And you'd throw up a picture on the screen of a typical guest. Maybe the guest is wearing a Cubs hat, and maybe they're got a nice shirt on, and maybe they're with their mom, and maybe there's a backdrop, something like that. And what you tell them is, "Okay, guys, we've got a contest going. We're going to see how many of these you can get. The last class got 20. Let's see how many you got. You got 30 seconds. What is a phrase you could say to this guest as soon as they walk up? Go." And they start going. Go Cubs, right? And then you got a flip chart up front, and you're writing it down. When people see you writing it down, they feel validated. They're going, so they just start throwing stuff out. And I'm telling you, the cars are running fast today. Got it. Yeah, that's right. Hey, are you from California? Yep, good. Got it. I loved your shirt. Great. Got it. In 30 seconds, you've got 25 responses, and then you just sit back and go, "Guys, that's all you got to do. Pick one of these. That's all you got to do." And I got to tell you, that was so effective for our teams. Number one, they participated with it. They came up with the ideas, but it was just so simple for them, and that we got out of sounding like robots at the front of that one.
Yeah.
I believe the same thing in food and beverage, by the way. I'll just throw that out.
Yeah.
You know, I'm one of those guys that I hate. I shouldn't say it. I hate the dreaded "Have a nice day" at the end of your transaction, or what at Disney sometimes people say "Have a Mickey day." I know they're trying to do the right thing, but that still gets you a C plus. But we told our guys, just say something about what's in front of them. They're bringing you a meal, right? They're looking at, you're cashing it out. Say, "Man, I love those fries." Oh, the guy goes, "Yeah. Oh, well, I picked those out. That's, you're pretty good. Hey, that bacon burger is my favorite." Oh, good. Doesn't cost anything. Doesn't take another second. Hey, I love that key lime pie. Beautiful. And that gets people, I think, much more. Have a nice day doesn't buy anything, but you can engage just a little bit, and that can help you get there.
Yeah, cool. We could keep going with these and actually we did setting this up. There's so many great stories and so many wonderful ways to both drive revenue and enhance, to lift your destination experience, your attraction experience. We talked through the value of using real estate, the real estate that you have, your assets to their fullest, growing your reasons to visit through effectively leveraging partnerships. Jeremy's innovative, the amazing admission strategies, ways we build relationships with guests. It's just and ways to make your destination stand out as distinctive, and that's the key thing, is activating stories through experiences that make you distinctive, make you different, make you preferred, and drive all those the key drivers of destination performance. So and keep your advocacy going out in the marketplace. It just we are chock full. I don't see any questions currently coming up. And again, I'm trying to be cognizant of time. Anything from our panel?
Sorry, Mark, if there's a few more minutes, right? I wanted to bring something up for overall discussion.
Yeah, dude.
We were talking in the beginning about limited CapEx investments to really create the guest experience, right? So I wanted to bring in risk mitigation as well, because no matter what the size is, you don't always get it right. I mean, if we look at, and I'll take this, like, let's look at the Star Wars hotel, for instance. They've tried taking guest experience to the extreme here, right? That it became almost like, let's say, a niche product to a certain extent. And I just wanted to ask, like, Bob and Rick, like, how do you mitigate risk, and what is like the right decision to make, right? So what are the things that you can palette when you want, or where do you start?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jeremy. It's a great question. We were actually talking about this the other day on a project that we're doing right now. We're helping to develop a really cool destination retail dining, entertainment, and attraction experience in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And so we're in the process of really getting into that, nervous period of the project where you're starting real hardcore value engineering and refining the concept of operations and all those things. And in doing that, you have to identify the value criteria you're engineering against, right? And so we said, yeah, okay, so one of them is a seamless branded experience. The second one is risk mitigation. I'll come back to that because it's your question. And the third one was about financial performance, got to do return on capital and all that. Well, it turns out there's a couple kinds of risk, and they have a weird relationship. One of them, simple-mindedly, is financial risk. So the definition is, hey, if we're wrong, we're not going to make our numbers. We're going to overinvest, or we're going to under margin, or that's a risk, right? Okay. The other one is what I would call brand risk. And one of the biggest balancing acts we think you have to make is you've got to balance those two. It's like, well, on the one hand, boy, that's really expensive, and I'm not sure we should do that. And on the other hand, if we don't do that, we're going to have an anemic offering, and that low-level offering could overall come right back to bite us, and it might trash our brand for the next decade, right? So you raise a really good point. There's lots of kinds of risk, and we think you have to balance. You have to take the longer view and say, yeah, what I know it's expensive, but what if we don't? It really does become important. So, people say, well, mitigating risk, yeah, but what define risk? So it's good I think it's good to ask that question all the way around the horn. Okay, what if we do and we're wrong? Well, then X. All right, what if we don't? Well, that's Y. Which is riskier, X or Y? I mean, I can tell you a quick anecdotal story from the Disney days when we did studio tour. We opened, and we knew it. We opened under capacity because we wanted to hit our opening date and our opening budget, but we knew from the early going the demand was going to be high. So somebody finally said, well, we're going to have to come up with what basically became a new land, but the anchor was the Hollywood Tower, Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. And said, okay, we're going to do that attraction. It's a great attraction. Well, in those days at that time, financially, purely, on opening day, that show had a negative net present value.
Wow.
But it was way better than what the cost in eroded attendance at the main gate would have been if we hadn't done it. And so again, I think these are all illustrations of you got to balance. And of course, if you're smart, you can figure out how to even the boat out as you get going. But that balancing of risk is real critical.
Can I layer on, because I also think that's such a key question. And Bob, I know we also were talking about this part. Now, I'll caveat this up front by saying I don't have to write the checks, so easy for me to say what I'm about to say. But the Star Wars Hotel particularly, was, and I didn't get a chance to experience it, but over the top, right? Over the top in the stories that it was delivering. And so it closed, didn't work for whatever reason. At the Disney company, they preach, you should be a risk taker. We support that. And I tell you, they took a big risk. And, it's one of those things that, how many more people now are going to say, hey, I want to work at that place. They were crazy enough to try that. I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said when people say we celebrate taking risks, even if we fail. Well, a lot of places don't. I mean, they say that, but they don't. Man, here, I think they're saying, hey, we gave it a great shot, and it was one of a kind, and they may get a lot of great things from that.
Rick, the other side of that one is you also learn, right?
Yeah.
You say, okay, here's valuable lessons learned, and whatever they were, right? Didn't do our market study right. There's a million reasons you could come up with for why maybe a very, very high-end niche product like that didn't do well in that environment. So now you go, okay, that doesn't mean we're not going to have any more ideas like that or take any more risks like that. It means the next 5, don't forget, put this on your wall. These were the 5 things we learned. Let's not do that again.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, the flip side is, okay, we couldn't make it work, but here's all the stuff that did work. Yeah. So next time we're coming up with one, you grab some of those things that worked and you plug those in. Yeah, so, Rick, I wanted to say one other thing that's tangential, but in a lot of your stories, I think there's a real interesting side benefit, which is when you do those cast member driven, those employee driven kinds of things, that builds tremendous relationship equity and loyalty with your staff.
Yeah.
They walk out there and they say, hey, that was my gag, or, hey, they listened to what I said. That I don't think we can underestimate, or overestimate the value of that going forward. You talk about a brand amplifier. As we know, there is no better brand amplifier than a really great staff member engaging a guest.
Yeah. I'll give you a 1-minute story that makes me look stupid that shows just exactly what you're talking about. But again, it was at Test Track. Test Track's a big thing. That's why there's lots of stories about Test Track. Anyway, we were having, we have financial targets just like everybody. And so we had to figure out where we were going to trim labor back all over the place. And so, operators are smart. We think we're smart. We get in a room. We think we have a plan. Boom, I got a plan. This is what we'll do, and we'll go. And I cut a position out of Test Track. And then after we had done it for about 3 weeks, I went out and had an engagement session with the team, with the frontline cast. How are we doing? How's this going? And they said a lot of nice things at first, but then they finally said, well, if you're really asking, you cut that line. You shouldn't have cut that line. And then I probably condescendingly said, well, we have these financial targets, and so we have to blah, 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 blah. And they said, no, we get that. You cut the position that ruined our productivity. If you cut this line over here, we're going to be just fine. And I said, okay, consider that done. And to your point, Bob, they said after that, I said, okay, well, if you're listening, I got 3 more ideas for you. And I'll never forget that session. Sometimes you got to admit you don't have all the answers, and they're the ones that do. That's for sure.
Jeremy, can you see the chat?
Yeah, and I just wanted to reply to Jared on this real quick, right? Because Jared asked, like, are there new experience expectations that you've noticed your guests have now that didn't exist a few years ago and require additional resources to address? So, and I was just typing a reply for Jared, and I was going to say yes, but in a very interesting way, because Jungle Island has been very much like, I'm sure everybody has seen these reels appear, Instagram versus reality. And Jungle Island for the longest time, because it's got a presence when you walk up to it. It's got a big main gate, it's got box offices, it's got huge theaters, but the product offering was never able to live up to the expectations. So with all the small incremental improvements that we've been doing over the year and a half, we've really increased the guest satisfaction to such an extent that finally expectations are almost meeting the reality of our product. Now, what we have done that we really added on that guest experience, right? We've created outposts inside the park. So whenever we added an extra layer of attraction, we try to figure out, like, hey, how can we interact with our guests? And those outposts serve 2 purposes. One, I mean, their primary purpose for us would be almost like a little outpost sales office, right? So we want to make sure that whoever we have to staff there need to be able to earn their own keep. Is it by selling animal feed? Is it by selling additional experience? Is it by selling some additional merch? Great. But then on the other side, it also ties into what Rick was talking about, where it really is to greet guests and welcome guests and interact with the guests. Because instead of just letting people loose in our park right now, there's really multiple touch points for the guests that were not there before. So yes, it comes at an additional expense because additional staffing is required, but by trying to be creative on how we offset that expense, it's almost like a wash, but when it comes to guest expectations and experience, it's really a plus. So honestly, and Jared, to that point, right, with a lot of the things that we do, we have our baseline model now for revenue, and whatever we try to do and innovate with, there's one main driver, and that is not losing money. I mean, it doesn't have to be making money, but not losing money is really the key here.
It's interesting, Jeremy, that we've got it on the wall at our office, but it's a quote from Michael Eisner at the peak of, what really was about to be a big turnaround for the Walt Disney Company. It was in a Variety article it was actually in a Variety article about special effects and creativity. But Michael's quote, and I'll mangle it a little bit, he said, look, it turns out if you look at the history of the Walt Disney Company particularly, but others too, creativity works in tough times. He said, to your point, he said, the key is to put the creative first and try not to lose money. Yeah. He said, you'll get through the tough time and then you'll grow, right? And that was pretty good advice. I wanted to try too, real quick before we run out of time totally. Holler asked about, are there other examples of local attractions? And the answer is, yeah. I mean, we could do a whole hour on this, and maybe we will if somebody's interested, but we did a lot of work with Icon Park here in Orlando. Icon Park was built in the middle of I Drive, and right before we got to it, over 3 years, it had 3 complete sets of leadership and 5 different brands, and it was not doing well, and it was hemorrhaging cash and all the things. So a brilliant young man with a great background in frankly real estate development and a rich family history in destination entertainment was brought in as a new CEO. He very quickly hired us and our research partners, Integrated Insight, to come and do this exact process we started with this morning talking about. And if you go fast forward from about 2019 to today, That park has completely turned around. It's become the crown jewel of the International Drive Entertainment District. It's thought of it as a mainstream in Orlando. It's making a profit, and it wasn't any one big giant whack. Yes, there were some capital improvements, but they were more functional, more basically infrastructure improvements, opening up sight lines, looking at guest flow and making it easier to walk and all those things. And once you do that and you do a branding effort and you begin to create a sense of place, which is what they did with landscaping and lighting and cleanliness and wayfinding, all those things, all of a sudden, there's no main gate at Icon Park. So attendance begins to go up. When attendance started to go up, then they were able to attract an even better tenant mix, which drives more attendance growth. And that in turn helps them do kind of what Jeremy's been talking a little bit about, which is, no, we don't need to invest in big ride and show. We'll have partners who want to be in that business do that with their capital. We'll provide the location, we'll provide the attendance space and the brand, and we'll rev share. So another good collective model about, and boy, we had no shortage of really expensive, cool ideas, and I still love some of them, but it turned out the best strategy was to do 1,000 smaller things at low capital cost, prove the performance, make the brand work, and then be really smart about the way you layer in the larger assets.
Good stuff. Well, we are about out of clock. I would love to the point of risk. Thank you for raising that, Jeremy, and the experimentation and innovation. I recently, and I give them full credit. I recently attended an IAPA webinar, and there was a guy, forgive me, I don't remember his name, but he was from the San Antonio Zoo, and he had a mentor as he was growing up that he highly respected, and a wonderful life career coach. And he shared that a park or a destination isn't a factory, it's a laboratory. So if you just continue to experiment and innovate, you might try 20 things over time, but one of them is going to change your business for 20 years. And I just I really loved that, and I'm gonna hang on to it and use it again in the future. But it pulls all this together to continue to innovate as we've illustrated through the past hour. So I guess I should sign off. I would love to thank everyone for attending. I hope that you got I hope you got as much out of this as I did, because I love listening to these things. And join us for the next one. We'll do another one real soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
It's great.